What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to Beyond the Nines. We've got another preview for you today. We've got Henry, Fulham fan, Henry. Great to have you. How are you doing?
Neil, thanks for having me, mate. Doing well. How about you?
Oh, yeah, football-wise, no. We get
Maybe,
inside a bit, but yeah, just wanted to get your thoughts on obviously Fulham is just overall this season. Things are slowing down a little bit now, but how do you think Fulham have been this season?
I think it's in the main. Besides a little bit of a bad form recently, it's been a really successful season. Obviously, coming up from the Championship, we've seen over the last couple of seasons how difficult that can be coming straight back down. But it's been really positive. We've got some really big results against some top teams, and yeah, I'm looking forward to obviously this season coming to a close and seeing what next season's got in store.
Yeah, and I'd hopefully like to be in that same position, but I'll get the table up in a second. It's not looking good from our perspective, but it's not even in our hands at the moment. We're just going to have 4 games to go. We'll have to see. But in terms of Craven Cottage at the moment, has it been your like fortress? Has it been something that you've enjoyed playing it? Like you've got most of your results from, but like how's Craven Cottage at the moment?
I think certainly first half of the season, obviously our first game of the season was that Liverpool game at home, which sadly, bad Fulham fan, I was actually away, couldn't go to that. And we got a massive result. First game, I think we drew against them, which was huge for us. First game we were expecting a battering, and sort of since then we had a great couple of months there. But looking at recently, as I mentioned before, we had I think 3 or 4 games on the spin at Craven Cottage that we had very bad results, but very difficult games as well. We had Arsenal, Brentford, and obviously more recently Man City. But there's been a few more recently where we have got results. It's certainly that first half of the season. It was a fortress, particularly we had Mitrovic. He was on his usual playing form, but more recently dropped off a little bit.
Yeah, I mean we'll talk about that a little bit later because I think there's
Sure.
some. I don't like to say there's some narrative of, oh, you're not got Mitrovic, therefore you're not very good. It's overly simplistic. From an outside perspective, I'll get that your thoughts in a second.
And I've heard it a lot, so
yeah,
that's fine.
exactly. And I don't want to say that because I know what it's like from our perspective where, oh, you don't have Madison, you're gonna lose. And it's like, well, no, but there's so many other things that are going on, but it's just the simple narrative. But just coming into, because I know you're at the Liverpool away game.
Sure.
But how did you find that game, and how did you find that game overall?
It was a little bit frustrating, really. I made the I'm sure people watching this probably watched the game, may have seen the highlights. I made the mistake as I was on the coach on the way back, re-watching that penalty quite a lot, and it just it just wasn't, was it?
No.
Anyway, so that was the frustrating thing. But other than that, I think we played really well. Would have been really nice to get a point, but it just didn't work our way. So yeah, I was really pleased with that game. I mean, it could have certainly gone either way, but going into it, Liverpool got a really good form at the moment. We could have got battered, but yeah, I was pleased with that performance. Obviously, not a shame not to get the point, but it was good.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. And watching the game as well, there was a lot from Liverpool in terms of the intensity. And I think, to be fair, from a defensive point of view, you coped for it pretty well. Obviously, the penalty, but apart from that, you coped with the majority of it. It wasn't like Leno was bailing you out, save after
For
save.
sure.
You know what I mean?
For sure, he had a great game, but we did have that strong defensive partnership with Tosin Adarabioyo and Tim Ream. Obviously, Tim Ream taking the injury and Issa Diop coming back in. They seem to work quite well together. And Leno as well, as you said, I know he wasn't doing everything all the time, but what a player. Fantastic.
Yeah. So coming into this, he was one that was written off a little bit, wasn't he, from Arsenal fans? And it just shows you sometimes that I think we've had players from previous positions where they've been written off at a club, they've come to another club, and he just looks. I wouldn't say he's one of the best. He's not say overachieved. He's just performed a lot higher than most people expected.
100%. It's really interesting. I've seen a lot on Twitter, as you do, of people saying stuff like, "Oh, if Bernd Leno was at Arsenal, maybe they will be doing better this season." But not sure I agree with that particularly. But as you said, I don't know, he's really come into his own. I think it's really good to have a keeper with experience come into your club at a time when you really need somebody like that. And he's just had a fantastic season. I would argue it's a real split between him and João Palhinha on who the best player of the season, signing of the season has been. And he's been fantastic. Really, I think without certainly without those two players, we'd be in the relegation spot.
Jeez, I mean, in terms of
Definitely.
Polini, he's one player that when the previous picture when you played 1-0, he absolutely smashed us. You absolutely for the 1-0 that you won at our ground,
Mm.
brilliant. Like he was so good. My thing is just hold on to him because there's so many teams that are just like, oh yeah, I'll have him. Like almost like
Yeah.
you're going to Tesco's for a meal deal. Yeah, I'll take him. And it's like,
We're all, yeah. I mean, Fulham fans, we're absolutely praying at the moment. I've seen stuff yesterday that now Aston Villa are interested in him as well. We've already got, I think, Liverpool, potentially Man United, Chelsea, Bayern Munich, a few. There's absolutely loads. We'll see. I think Fulham are quite keen to certainly keep him one more season, but I think if they were made a ridiculous offer, sort of, I don't know, maybe in the 75 million range, I'd be inclined to think they might take it. But I really hope he stays for at least one more season
yeah.
because he's been fantastic.
Yeah, I think he's been great as well, and I think you're right. But do you see? So say you say hypothetically you get that money. Do you trust the club in reinvesting in the right players to then like build? Because that's where we've done at the moment. Because we've had to sell an asset and then build our squad bigger. Sell an asset, build our squad in general bigger. So do you trust your club to kind of do the same thing? The 75 mil.
It's really interesting because obviously those sort of championship seasons we had where we went up and down a couple of times, we had players and we made some money and bought players that didn't really fill those gaps. So I honestly haven't thought about it yet. Probably would. I think the club has definitely got better in recruitment over the last couple of years. I mean, they found Polina in the first place, and certain other players. So I'd say I would, but it's a very difficult thing to process when effectively your best player is gone and you've got to fill that gap. It's very hard, and I don't know. But I think so.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And again, that's the thing with with smaller teams. And I think there was a few years back there was a time where a lot of the bigger six teams were holding on for that. And in terms of this season, in terms of your expectations, is it just kind of because you're in that middle point now? You're potentially could get, but it is looking less and less likely. So what's the ambition for like the end of the season? Now we've got 4 games to go.
I think European football is very unlikely. Be an absolute dream if it happened. And there was a part of the season, as you said, where we were in sort of that fifth, sixth position, sort of what Villa are doing, funnily enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think a top 10 finish would be fantastic. Be funny to finish above. Well, either Chelsea and Brentford or one of them. Chelsea would be quite amusing, as you know. But yeah, I think top 10 sort of. I know people. You should strive to do better, but I think we got a few tough games left. I think if we can finish top 10, that's a really good season coming up out of the Championship.
And I think you're right. And also, you say it's. I think considering you've just come up from the Championship, anything that's not relegation is considered, as you're probably thinking, it's considered a benefit. But you've coming in if in terms of that the 10th place, I think that's still a really good season if you finish there.
100%. I mean, if you spoke to me early on in the season, I would have 100% bit your hand off for 17th place. But sort of a couple of months ago, sort of it was getting to top 10 minimum. I'd be very disappointed if we went below that. I think we've been really good. But as I said early on, we played some really tough teams in the last couple of months. Still got a few big games left. Obviously that the game that I'm sure we're going to move on to, the Leicester game. That'll be very tough. So yeah, I think the top 10 finish will be an end to a really good season.
I think so. Yeah, and you mentioned it moved on quite specifically onto the game. So obviously the previous game, the 1-0, and then coming into this one at Craven Cottage. How are you thinking how do you think it's going to go, or what are your thoughts on Leicester just in general?
I think, as I've said to you many times, I really like Leicester, and I think it's. I mean, as a fan, it must be a really frustrating season where you've had certain results where, on paper you just should have done better, and I think you still should be considered a top team. And I think that game at Craven Cottage is not going to be easy. I think you've obviously got 100% more to fight for than we do. Yes, we may have Mitrovic who's just come back, but that doesn't mean that he'll be sort of back to how he was playing early on in the season. I think it'll be a tough game, to be honest. I think there is no game this season that's been particularly easy. I know, teams will argue that people have had certain games against Southampton or Forest where, they've just smashed them. But Fulham haven't had an easy game this season. I mean, we haven't really won a game against the Big Six, but we've only lost by 1 goal, I think, in 9 games, which is a bit of a mental stat there. And in
It's
other places
reflecting a
we've
goal
dropped.
difference as well. You only got -1 goal difference, which is,
Exactly.
considering this end of the season, really good.
100%. I think early on we were sort of quite high plus, but as I said, a few recent results dropped off a little bit. But yeah, it's been really good. No complaints really.
Fair enough. That's good to hear. I'm glad, and I wish you best things even next season and staying up, because I think that would be great to kind of keep that consistency with being up and down, and things like getting that consistency will be really
Definitely.
important. And as part of that, obviously Marco Silva. What have you made of him? Because essentially, it seems like the Everton curse, where they get a decent manager, then they go and they thrive somewhere else. But what have you made of him? Well, obviously, he was within the Championship, but what have you made of him since he's joined?
A lot of people definitely have spoken to me about that sort of the Everton curse thing, and I think
Hmm.
it's been fantastic. I think you saw it very early on in when he came into the club, and obviously what we did in the Championship last season. I really like him. I think sort of that breath of, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but that breath of fresh air that a club needed at a time where we're almost expected uh, to go straight back down. I really like him. I think he's a great motivator tactically. We've where times where we've had whether it be injuries or suspensions, we've managed to sometimes get results, often play very well, but lose unfortunately by a very small margin. I think I think we you sort of have Scott Parker, and there was the whole stigma around that, and then it's just a very different experience, really, in a really positive way.
Yeah, and I think as well, what's I agree, and I think he's got the best. It's so nice having a manager
That's it.
that gets the best out of the players, that plays
Exactly.
their strengths and get the best, and you're getting the right profile of player in as well. And it's
100%.
just, it makes you appreciate when your team was terrible.
So much more. And, the fact that I can say this year that I'm not sure there's a single player that's had a bad season at all. I
Mhm.
know that may be quite obvious considering a lot would argue that we've overperformed. Um, but yeah, 100% exactly what you said. I will often speak and see people reminiscing a couple of years ago when a lot of players at our club were still there,
Mm.
and sort of, the dark days and how far we've come. So definitely that is almost entirely due to the management there. Fantastic, him and Louis Boamorte.
Yeah, exactly. And I was saying to a Newcastle, I was speaking to a Newcastle fan when they came down to the ground. Well, when they're coming to the ground, and I mentioned to them, just enjoy not being terrible, and they just kind of understand, because it
Oh, they
basically
would
was
get it.
that.
Yeah,
It's like, if you're outside the top six, you don't get it as much, but you understand, you've seen, and you probably were there as well, where I've been
for
to the
sure.
ground when we were in the Championship, and people go, I wasn't as good as the old days, and it's like, oh yeah, but we're here now, we're crap now. And then to
Mm.
see your team kind of take up, it's just the ability to go, don't get carried away with people saying, you're going to achieve this, you're going to achieve this. Just enjoy watching a football match that you actually enjoy.
100%. And even I know, I watched your episode with Sean, Aston Villa. And I remember you guys were talking about when we all sort of met up and were speaking about predictions. And even then, Fulham had a fantastic season last year. You got
Mhm,
Mitrovic who'd broken the goal record, whatever. I still was like, well, it'd be really great to stay up. What do I think it's happened? I'm not 100% sure. I'll take
mhm,
anything, 17th and up. So I've
mhm.
never, you sort of get used to that when you've had a few years of real poor football to not get over your head.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing with, especially with Sean, that's gone from at the point there was
Unbelievable. Yeah.
just where they were, down the bottom, and then Emery just took, and he's not
Yeah.
even made that many signings. He made a couple, that's it, and he's took
That
them
that's
right up to European spots.
that's the thing. Fulham beat Villa, and I think Emery was signed within the next couple of weeks. And from that, whenever it was back in, I don't know, months ago now, they've gone well above us, and they're going to be hopefully playing European football next season. So yeah, it's a real crazy turnaround. It just shows this season another surprise, really.
Yeah,
Crazy.
and that's what I mean. There's been surprises all through the season, which I've enjoyed, but I just don't want us to be one of the surprises to go down. I mean, I've
No,
got
I
to
hope
the
not.
table at the moment. I mean, it's tight down the bottom. You're looking at there's two separate gaps at the moment, in terms of between like Everton to us, and then kind of West Ham and up to I think anything about 39 points is safe. So the only people I'm really looking at is Leicester, Leeds, Nottingham Forest, Everton, and then probably Southampton, because they seem like they've down tools a little bit and accepted
Yeah,
defeat.
I'd be very surprised if West Ham sort of creep into that. I think, as you
Yeah.
sort of said, anything, 15th to obviously, well, Palace and Chelsea,
Mhm.
you're sort of set now. But yeah, obviously you're just there, sort of above the line on goal difference. But I don't know. It's a funny season, and it is as it has been at the very top. It's been so
Yeah.
tight at the bottom of the table, and I think really besides, well, unfortunately, Southampton. There's no one really you could say clearly throughout any part of the season 100% going down with them. So I don't know.
Yeah, totally agree. And it just takes that little bit of upturn in form that's the case. So coming
Exactly.
into this game, obviously we need it. But who would, out of those four, well, say the four teams in
Yeah.
Leicester, Leeds, Nottingham Forest, Everton, so obviously four, I wouldn't
Mm,
say massive team, but two with a lot of prestige and also a lot of history, a lot of those teams as well.
for
Even if it
sure.
was like recent history, who would be your who would be your three to go down?
I think Southampton, Leeds, and it's going to be one of the two, obviously, between Forest and Everton. I'm going to say
Mhm.
Everton. Yeah, it's so tough and so hard to call. You asked me next week. Well, sorry, you asked me yesterday. I probably would have a different answer to you. It's constantly
Yeah,
changing. It's literally, it could be a matter of goal difference. Someone stays up or goes down.
yeah.
Yeah, I think Everton have had a season to forget, and perhaps going to be one of those teams that goes down.
Yeah, I'm think potentially as well. They had a little bit of a bounce, but it seems like they're back back in the mud.
Mm,
But I don't know if you know our fixture before this. Sorry,
that's
our
all right.
fixture before this was Everton and Leeds. We played them, drew them both.
Yeah, no, I did see that.
So coming into this game, it looks like we have to go for the win, because our
Sort of
next
a
few
must win.
games is
Remind
kind
me
of a must
again
win.
your game after us. So what your fixtures looking like after that?
Sure, let's go into that one. I'll go into Fulham's as
Oh,
well.
sure.
You've got we've got Fulham and Liverpool, Newcastle, and then West Ham.
That's a bloody hard run. Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
easy.
No, not at all. Not at all. But in comparison to the other teams down there, obviously no
Hmm.
games are easy if you're down. Well, no games are really easy at all this season. But exactly, to take a look at Forest. Yeah, again, that's probably just as hard as your run, if not harder.
Mm. I mean,
Taken away.
Chelsea, if they pick a bit of form, Arsenal, I think, is a write-off, especially
Yeah.
in the form they're in. Crystal Palace and then Southampton. But I think at this stage, because it's so tight, we're relying on other teams to do badly. And it literally, as you're
Yeah.
mentioning, goal difference, we're on 13, so that's my hoping
Yeah.
and praying that's the case. But coming back to the game, it is one of those games, and again, you know what it's like being in that. It's coming to the end of the season where it's like, just
For
hold
sure.
on, man, just hold on.
For sure, 100%. It's really not a nice thing when you're relying on other teams. We've had it, a couple of seasons, and not to say that's going to happen, but we went down as a result of it. It's horrible
Yeah,
when you're relying on other people, and if you can control your destiny in any way whatsoever, in the
mhm,
league, it's the goal. But yeah,
yeah.
very very difficult relying on others. But I do, and I'm not even just saying that because I'm here and because it's you, but I think you'll stay up. I think so.
I'm hoping so,
Yeah,
because the quality of the team we have
exactly.
shouldn't be going down. But that's with our previous manager. That's the problem. I think I was saying to you, I was like, I just want to get rid of him, because not a bad manager. He just, his time has finished, and
Mm,
you're seeing what's happening now as part of that.
100%.
So just coming into, I'll get the lineup from the Liverpool game as well. So obviously you said Mitrovic coming back into it. You said Tim Reed was going off as well. But do you expect it to change too much in terms of 4-2-3-1 that you're going to set up with against us?
Um, Oh, sorry. I was just looking at number 30. Okay, fine. Yeah, just fine.
Yeah, so better.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I think obviously Mitrovic coming back in. Don't think it will be terribly dissimilar. I wouldn't
Mhm.
be surprised if Cedric Suarez was swapped for Kenny Tete, who's been really the main man in that position. I'm still not quite sure Cedric was playing. But anyway, here we go. I think Kenny Tete could come in. But other than that, I think potentially unchanged. I think
Okay.
so. I think particularly that, as you said before, that sort of defending partnership, swapping. Well, had to swap Ream because of injury for Diop. I think that worked really well. And normally, when I think Cedric had a good game as well. I wouldn't say that Tete necessarily deserved to be replaced because of that game. I just think Kenny Tete is better in general. Yeah, I think so.
Fair enough. And is there anybody that you think we should look at? Obviously, you mentioned Polina as well. Is there anybody else that we think we should look out for? Because I think we speak a little bit off camera, like Harry Wilson and people like that. But is there anybody in particular that you think for Leicester fans to look out for, just in terms of this will be the threat?
Again, I think Willian there has had a really good season. Potentially somebody to watch out for. I think, particularly coming down that side, it's another one of those players. You talked about Bernd Leno, and you talk about Willian, the season he had with Arsenal as well, which wasn't awful. It just wasn't really what Arsenal needed in that time. And he's come into Fulham and he's been absolutely fantastic. You've got another player as well who sometimes has come in for Willian's place. You've got Manor Solomon, and there's a little bit. I mean, I know Willian has been a lot better than Solomon, but has also played a lot more. It's definitely been the more favourable player to be picked, but he's been absolutely fantastic this season.
Yeah, and I think in general you guys have been setting up in such a good way as well that it's a formation that's bigger than the sum of its parts, and I think that's what's been like. The players are maybe not be individually that great, but they're outperforming what their individual ability is.
Exactly, 100%. And as I spoke about earlier on, that sort of first half of the season where big results. Well, I know we didn't win, but that Liverpool draw, and you look at beating Brentford earlier on in the season, playing against top teams. When I'm not saying ourselves we're obviously not a good team, but just sort of a formation in a sense where the team is performing much better together, and not, although Mitrovic has banged in a few goals, not necessarily relying on a single or two individuals. It's sort of a whole team effort, and yeah, that's massively helped.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I think one thing is, again, we're going to talk about it. We'll talk about it in a bit. I also talk about it now. We mentioned earlier about Mitrovic and the fact that I think, is it too an easy narrative just to go, oh, Mitrovic isn't playing, Fulham have lost, because we've had a similar thing with Maddison and before. It's just oversimplistic analysis from people that only watch Match of the Day.
100%. I've heard it constantly, but I have an interesting sort of stat. It's certainly around this number. Mitrovic hasn't played, I believe, a third of the season. It's certainly around that number, which is pretty wild. And Fulham, we've still performed. We've got results without him. So I don't know. Whilst he has scored some absolutely crucial goals, particularly when that first half of the season, there's been other players that have contributed, you might argue, equally as well. And we talk about Polina, we talk about Bernd Leno and Willian as well. We can definitely do it without him, but of course that strength up front has made us perform so much better.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I think again, it was respect. Well, I don't want to mention it because, again, the bigger than some of your parts we kind of mentioned before.
Sure.
Another thing I wanted to mention as well, Ranieri, a manager that I think after us, I think he pretty much came to you as well.
Yeah.
So I know things ended sour with him, and it kind of ended sour with us as well. But what did you make of him as like a manager?
It's sort of to take, forgetting that last season where he eventually left Leicester, to take what happened with you guys, coming up and winning the league, pretty much the polar, not to be terribly harsh, but not far from the polar opposite. Just basically wasn't the right man for that time and that team at all. Just not a fit whatsoever. The players we had probably didn't help. The quality sort of wasn't there, but yeah, he just wasn't the right guy for the job, to be honest. And funnily enough, I did have a feeling you'd speak about him, but it's not something that I've dwelled on or thought about that much. It's just, to compare it with Scott Parker, very different. Ranieri, he was only there for a little bit of time and just completely wasn't suitable. And you could see that quite early on. Scott Parker, we got promoted, and then you had this sort of, however long it was in the Prem, and yeah, just that was sort of a complete managerial blame. Like, we definitely had talent there, it just wasn't being utilised. But Ranieri just completely wasn't the right time for him at all.
Fair enough. And the problem is, I would have loved him to just retire after Leicester, but he just
Yeah.
loves football too
Yeah.
much. That's the
Yeah.
problem. I don't know if he came across in his press conference. He just loves football too much. But
Yeah.
Leicester would have been the perfect way to go, even if he was sacked. To go, look, the last thing you won the league, got into the semi-finals of the Champions League, which seems like so long ago now.
Crazy to think
Which
about.
is
Yeah.
mental considering where we are now. But yeah, just coming into that, predict what do you think about the game coming up, and any predictions at all?
As I said before, mate, and it's not just me saying it. I think particularly in the position you're in and the position where we're in, where I don't really think we can get European football, and we're 100% staying up. I think you've got massive amounts more to play for than us. I think we may just edge it. I think a 1-0 or a 2-1. Don't think it's going to be easy at all. Could even be a draw, but I think my prediction is just going to be a 2-1.
Sounds good.
I
Sounds
think
good to me.
difficult. Probably not ideally what you want, but
No.
I think roughly something like that. I think potentially Mitrovic getting a goal or assist, like, absolutely raring to come back. Yeah, I think we may just edge it. I could be completely wrong, but yeah.
Fair enough. No, it's one of the things. It was just to get your thoughts on how you are, because again, some fans,
Sure.
and at times you're going into a game thinking we're confident, ready to go,
Yeah,
get a
yeah.
loss or a draw. These things happen all the time, so fair enough. And just finally, again, because it's interesting to look at the table, who do you think's getting Europe? Because looking at the top of the table,
It's absolutely
it's
wild, isn't it?
it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, sort of Fulham, we sort of dropped off, and perhaps my attention didn't focus over that way. But yeah, I think I guess Villa have dropped off a little bit, but Brighton have come up. Yeah, I think Brighton. Yeah, that's very crazy, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so it looks like the top. It looks like a top 5 for
yeah,
the Champions League spots, and after that, there is the option of. I don't think Tottenham are kind of falling, but they're not sure. Brighton, do you think? Because for me,
mm,
I know probably you're a bit different in terms of Brentford, but any team outside the top 6, if they're getting into it's for me, it's like go on then,
no,
because
totally
do you know what I
agree with
mean?
you. Totally agree with you. And as much as sort of the Fulham Brentford banter, they've had a fantastic season, unbelievable. I mean, they sort of annihilated us when we went to them a few months ago. So yeah, 100% agree with you. Anyone outside the big 6 would be brilliant. Yeah, I think both Brighton and Villa will be playing European football. I
Yeah.
think I haven't really decided about Tottenham, whether they'll somehow creep into the Champions League spot or not. But yeah, I think Brighton and Villa both just seem to have been fantastic. I'm not sure. Well, us, I think we're a little bit far off, and I'm not sure about Brentford. But yeah, I think both Brighton and Villa will, and that'll be just fantastic to see.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'd love it too. Finally, but yeah, Brent Henry, it's been great to have you on. Thanks for your insights into
Thank you, mate.
Fulham and that. Where can the people find you?
Oh, I don't really do anything sort of. I just go to games, really. I don't do any content or anything like that. But I'm Henry999 on Instagram with a 3, so H3NRY999
I'll
on
I'll
Instagram.
link it below, mate. Don't worry.
You'll
But I
just see
just
me
thought,
posting rubbish and also Fulham related content from time to time. But yeah,
and you've
just
probably seen by the thumbnail, you're featured on the Fulham page, so it's bigger than what we've
yeah, there
done.
we go.
Well
There
done,
we
mate.
go.
Yeah,
Thanks,
but
mate.
yeah,
Yeah, that was last game of the season last season. Going over to Sheffield United, getting absolutely battered. I think the players were probably still drunk from the celebrations that went on in the week for lifting the title. And yeah, I wore some sort of I wore effectively an afro that you could wear with black and white Fulham colours, and made it onto the Fulham Instagram, and just made it my photo ever since.
yeah. No, it's been good, and why not? But yeah, appreciate you coming on. Like, subscribe, everybody, all that good stuff. Thank you for making this far into the stream as well. We'll see you all for the post match of the Fulham game. So goodbye.